found the listing online. It seemed like a normal apartment until I opened the closet and I found the tunnel he used to watch me sleep. In 2021, I moved to Chicago to start grad school. Money was tight and student housing was laughable. So I turned to Craigslist. That's where I found Eli's listing. It was clean, to the point. Quiet apartment in Logan Square. Room available. Female preferred. $700, all utilities included. Honestly, too good to be true. I messaged him straight away. Eli replied within an hour, said he was a freelance photographer, early 30s, introverted but respectful, didn't party and mostly worked at night. I met him the next day. He had this gentle, soft-spoken way about him, almost shy. The apartment was third floor walk up in an old building that probably hadn't seen renovation since the 70s. Still, it had character, crown mouldings, big bay windows and creaky wood floors. The room he offered me was spacious with a huge window overlooking the street. Only one odd thing. The closet was padlocked shut. I asked him about it. Eli laughed it off, said it was just a storage area for his photography equipment and old film reels. He didn't want it disturbed because some of it was delicate and expensive. He promised it wouldn't affect me. I was too broke to care, honestly. I moved in the next day. At first, it felt like any other old apartment. Squeaky floors, pipes groaning when the heat kicked in, wind tapping the windows. But about a week in, I started hearing something at night, from inside the closet. It wasn't the creaking kind of noise you expect from old wood shifting. It was softer, rhythmic, shuffling. One night I got fed up and I knocked on the door. Something knocked back twice. I remember laughing it off, thinking maybe it was a draft or old hinges. Still, I put a heavy chair in front of the door before bed that night. The next morning, the chair had been nudged slightly to the side. That same week, Eli told me he had to go out of town for a freelance gig in Milwaukee. He'd be gone for 3 days, so I waved him off, saying, "No worries." But as soon as he left, the weirdness ramped up. The faucet in the bathroom turned on by itself in the middle of the night. My toothbrush was wet when I hadn't touched it. A piece of toast appeared in the toaster one morning, already browned. You see, no one else had keys. No one else should have been able to get inside. One afternoon, I came home from class and found Eli's bedroom door slightly open. He never left it that way. Curiosity got the better of me, so I peeked inside. It looked staged, not lived in. There was no clothes, no mess, just a perfectly made bed, a single chair, and a small desk with a dusty laptop. No signs of daily use. It was like a show apartment. The hairs on my neck stood up. I backed out and I closed the door. That night, around 3 a.m, I was jolted awake by the sound of breathing. Not mine, not from outside, but from inside the room. I froze, listening. It was coming from the direction of the closet. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the door. But the next morning, I noticed something that stopped me cold. A child-sized handprint on the inside of my bedroom window. It hadn't been there before, and I sure as hell didn't put it there. I called my friend Jess to come stay over. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was spooked being alone. That night, the house was dead silent until about 1:17 a.m. Click. Jess muted the TV. "Did you hear that?" It came from the closet. We both stood up. Another click. Then a low, dragging noise. I grabbed the flashlight and Jess grabbed the wrench from my toolbox. We approached the closet. The padlock looked intact at first, but it wasn't clicked shut. It had been placed there to look locked. I slowly opened the door and the smell hit us immediately. Mildew, sweat and rot. Inside wasn't just a closet, it was a tiny makeshift room. A foam camping mat on the floor, a battery lantern, empty wrappers, fast food bags, dirty clothes, and worst of all, a hole in the back drywall, just large enough for someone to crawl through. Jess gagged and stepped back, and I moved the flashlight to the hole and followed it. The passage led to a hidden shaft that connected the apartment's surface ducts. Inside that little crawl space were several items: a disposable camera, a stack of my underwear, and a small journal filled with handwritten notes describing everything I'd done for the past 3 weeks. Shower times, what I wore, who I talked to on the phone, even the songs I played. And the last entry read, "Tonight she checks the closet. I'll be ready." We ran from the apartment, called the police from a 7-Eleven down the block. They found Eli in a motel less than a mile away. Inside his room was a laptop. On it were hours of hidden camera footage from inside my bedroom. Some were infrared, some were from inside the crawl space. They also found a key labelled maintenance access. It had been stolen from a contractor working on a unit upstairs. Eli had never gone to Milwaukee. He staged a trip to throw me off while preparing whatever he had planned to do next. His bedroom, just a cover. He lived in the closet, quietly watching, coming out only when I was asleep or gone, living in the walls like some insect, feeding off routine. I haven't lived with another roommate since, and I check every closet, every crawl space, every attic. Even in hotel rooms, I knock on walls and check vents. Sometimes, when I try to fall asleep, I imagine the breathing sound I heard that night, and I wonder, was that the first night he made noise, or just the first time I heard it? Because that journal, it had entries going back 3 months. I only moved in 6 weeks ago. She never stopped smiling, even when I found her sitting in my room at 4 AM holding a knife. I met Marissa through a university housing board during my 2nd year. Rent was too steep to live solo, and she seemed normal enough. Friendly, clean, very into crystals and meditation. She mentioned she was a psychology major with an interest in sleep disorders and lucid dreaming. I thought that was quirky but harmless. We signed the lease on a 2-bedroom near campus, and the first month, totally fine. She was quiet, respectful of shared spaces, and always offered me tea. But there was one thing that made me uneasy, even early on. She never stopped smiling. Not just when she was happy or in conversation, but constantly. Even when doing dishes, staring at her phone or reading alone in silence, it was subtle at first, but the longer I lived with her, the more unnatural it looked. Like her face was stuck that way. The weirdness ramped up gradually. Sometimes I'd hear her whispering at night, muffled and repetitive, coming from her room. One night I knocked and asked if she was doing okay. She answered immediately. "I'm just studying," she said, "practicing memory anchors." Whatever that meant. Then there was sticky notes. I started finding them all over the apartment. One inside the fridge that said, "Open me in dreams." Another stuck to the TV remote, "You're not really awake." She taped one to the bathroom mirror that said, "Don't trust reflections after 2:33 AM. So when I confronted her about it, she just smiled, wider than usual. "They're part of my lucid dreaming experiments," she said. "You'll thank me someday." I told her to knock it off. She apologized, still smiling. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I jolted upright and I reached for my lamp, but it didn't turn on. In the dim glow from the hallway, I could see a figure standing in my doorway. It was Marissa, just standing there, smiling. "Marissa," I whispered. She didn't respond, just turned and walked away slowly, like nothing happened. I didn't sleep again that night, and the next morning, I asked her why she'd come into my room. Her smile didn't budge. "I didn't," she said. 3 nights later, I woke up again, this time to giggling. Not loud, but close. I turned over. Marissa was sitting at the edge of my bed, her back to me. In her hands was one of the kitchen knives. She was turning it slowly under the light, watching how it caught the glow from my lava lamp. I froze. She didn't react, didn't look at me, just kept whispering to herself. I finally said her name, barely able to get it out, and she turned her head halfway towards me, but not her body. "I was just checking if this was still a dream," she whispered. "If you scream, I'll know I'm awake." I rolled out of bed and bolted for the door. She didn't follow. I just ran to the front yard in my pajamas and called campus security from my phone. When they arrived, Marissa was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, just smiling at the wall. The knife was gone, but her notebook was open beside her. Inside were hundreds of repeated phrases. "It's not real until I bleed. She screams and I wake. Dream anchor, scream, blood, blade." They took her for a psych evaluation. Her parents were contacted and pulled her out of school. Apparently, this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. I moved out the next day, and for months afterwards, I'd wake up at 2:33 a.m. and check every door, every corner, every reflection. And sometimes, just for a second, I'd think I saw her face in the mirror, still smiling, still waiting for me to scream. After a devastating breakup and losing my job in the same week, I left San Diego behind with what little money I had saved and drove north to Portland. I needed to hit reset, fresh place, fresh start, but what I didn't have was a lot of cash. I slept in my car for a few days while job hunting and crashing on a friend's couch. I scanned Craigslist constantly for cheap rooms, sublets, anything. That's when I found the listing. Room available in shared apartment, quiet, private, no parties, ideal for a respectful tenant, $400 a month, all utilities included. Even in Portland, that price was suspiciously low. Still, I was desperate. I messaged the lister. The response came almost instantly. The person, who called himself Greg, said he was a night shift worker, mid-50s, private, quiet, rarely at home. He said I wouldn't even notice if he was there. We could keep to ourselves, split chores, and maintain privacy. He offered a video tour. I never saw his face, just the camera shaking as he walked through the unit. His voice was low, muffled, careful. The place was older but clean, a little outdated, and the bedroom he showed me was fully furnished with a small bed, desk, and closet. It looked perfect. Against my better judgment, I said yes. When I arrived with my duffel bag and backpack, he left the door unlocked for me, saying he was at work. A note on the table welcomed me. There was no Wi-Fi, but I figured it was temporary, no big deal. And that first night felt odd. The apartment had like a weird energy, claustrophobic, and the windows were covered in blackout curtains nailed to the wall, not just hung on rods. I tried to pull one back and realised the window behind it had been boarded up. There were locks on some of the kitchen cabinets, and the fridge was mostly empty except for a few off-brand energy drinks and a container of rice labelled "Do Not Open." His room, which was directly across the hall from mine, remained closed. I didn't hear a sound from inside, even though I knew he wasn't at work. I'd seen a beat-up Toyota Corolla parked outside every night. Still, I brushed it all off. I had bigger things to worry about, finding work and rebuilding my life. 3 nights in, I woke up around 2:10 a.m. I don't know what stirred me, maybe a sound, maybe a feeling. But the moment I opened my eyes, I knew something was off. I heard footsteps, slow, soft, measured. They creeped along the old floorboards just outside my bedroom door. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and waited. The footsteps stopped, and then a whisper. Too faint to understand, just low, breathy hiss, like someone mouthing words through the door. I waited for 5 minutes before opening it. The hallway was dark and empty. Greg's door was closed, and when I asked him about it the next morning through a text, because he never spoke in person, he replied, "Old floors, might have been the building settling. Happens a lot." But from that point on, I started noticing more. The smoke detector in my room had a blinking red light. It wasn't a smoke detector, it was a camera hidden behind a cheap casing. I checked the other rooms, 3 more cameras, all positioned to face high traffic areas: bathroom, kitchen, hallway. When I asked Greg directly about it, he messaged, "Security system from a previous tenant. I'll remove them soon, don't worry." But he never did. My paranoia spiked. I stopped changing in my room and unplugged everything electronic. I brought a privacy screen for my laptop and started sleeping with a pocket knife under my pillow. I tried to find the lease agreement. It wasn't under my name. When I checked the mailbox, I found no letters addressed to Greg, just one for a woman named Megan Alvarez. I never saw her, I never met her. I began to wonder if she had once lived here and if she ever left. One evening, I pretended to leave for work, locking the door behind me and walking down the street. I circled back around and came in through the window which I had quietly unlocked earlier. Greg's bedroom door was ajar. I stepped inside and the smell hit me first. Sweat, mildew, something metallic. His room was a wreck. Fast food wrappers, energy drink cans stacked in towers, and greasy fingerprints on everything. But the centerpiece of the room was a makeshift command center, an old desk with 2 laptops and 5 monitors. Each screen displayed a camera feed. My room, the hallway, the bathroom, the living room, even a view from behind my closet. That's when I realized something chilling. The camera behind the closet wasn't installed in the closet, it was inside the wall. I returned to my room, my heart pounding. I pulled everything out of the closet and tapped the back wall. Hollow. Using a screwdriver, I popped off a piece of drywall that looked slightly out of place, and behind it, a tunnel. Cramped, narrow, filled with wires and the faint smell of decaying wood. I crawled through. The crawl space extended beyond my wall and turned sharply left. As I moved deeper, I saw signs of occupancy. Foam padding, a sleeping bag, empty cans, old Polaroids scattered like confetti. Photos of people, different people, all sleeping, all from my room's angle. One Polaroid stood out, a woman with curly hair clutching a pillow mid-sleep. There was a date on the back, Megan, 2019. My stomach turned. I kept crawling, and at the end of the passage, I found another hidden compartment. Inside were stacks of VHS tapes and USB drives, all labelled by date and room number. I recognised the room number. It was mine. And some of them had my name on them. Others had names I didn't recognise, but all of them ended with the same word written in red Sharpie: archive. I crawled back and I packed my bag. I didn't care about my things, I just needed out. As I stepped into the hallway, I nearly collided with Greg. Except, it wasn't Greg. The man in front of me was tall, gaunt, unshaven, eyes sunken so deep they looked like bruises. He didn't say a word, he smiled. Not the kind of smile people give when they're happy, the kind that looks like a crack in a mask. He raised his hands, gloved, and in one, he held a cordless drill. I ran. He lunged, but I pushed past, shoved the front door open and sprinted down the block barefoot. I made it to a 24-hour gas station and I called the police. They searched the apartment the next morning. Greg, or whoever he was gone, but they found the crawl space, the cameras, the VHS tapes, and worse, they discovered another hidden compartment behind the fridge. Inside were IDs, 7 of them, all with different names, all women. Megan Alvarez was among them. None of them had been reported missing, but none of them had updated any public records in over 2 years. I haven't lived with anyone since. I check every smoke detector, every vent, even screw in the wall. I look for red lights in the dark. Sometimes I wake up at 2:12 AM with the overwhelming feeling that someone is watching me, not from outside, but inside the walls. I still have one of the USB drives the police returned to me. I've never plugged it in, but sometimes I do think about it, and I wonder if I watch it long enough, will I see him standing there, just behind me?